Hi,
This morning. All right.
what's your name?
Ayo.
Ayo. Nice to meet you.
Am I going to have one? I mean, when Abby told me that you would come,
Yes.
again, my part is just to do a little bit of background check. And who that we're talking to, or that will go into the magazine. And I saw a piece that BBC did on you.
Yeah.
I said, no, we get that in. That's it. If a sister is on BBC, she must be doing something. So the platform for African magazine is to capture African story and to share with the world. Yeah. So every story matters. That is where the whole idea of every story matters come from. All right, so who is Tokunbo's Kitchen?
Okay, so Tokunbo is obviously myself. For people who don't know, Tokunbo means somebody that came from over the seas, because I was born right here in London, in Camden Town, in one of the coldest winter at the time, in 1981. And then my mom took me back to Nigeria, and obviously I act like I loved the weather in Nigeria, but was forced to come back when I was 9. Grew up in Tottenham, so I lived I've always lived in North London. I went to school in Hornsey and did my university. And so I did my first degree in psychology, and then later on went back to do a master's in social work about 10 years ago. I've always cooked, and I remember my mom forcing me into the kitchen when I was 12, and that age will always stay with me because she told me, I'm cooking for my family and you're already 4 years behind. So I was literally like forced into the kitchen. So for me, I grew up, with the expectation that I was always going to be cooking for a family one day. And because my mom, it was just myself and my mom for a long time. So when I was cooking, I would only cook the food that I really enjoyed. So my favorite stew growing up was okra stew. And I would cook it so well that anytime we had visitors, my mom would be like, have you tasted Tokunbo's okra? And the person would be like, no. So I'd have to go into the kitchen and obviously cook the amazing okra stew for this person. So that's why I'd always kind of had these high standards for myself in terms of food. And then in 2013, I was living in Washington, D.C. for a year. And food was a great way for me to connect with people in D.C. I remember one of my best friends now, we went to a Ghanaian restaurant to watch the African Cup of Nations. And food became a really vocal point for me in terms of the connections that I made. So that's when I started to look at food as not just as a chore, but something that we can actually bring people together. So, and also in DC, they had this amazing food truck culture where you can literally eat around the world in the food trucks in the financial district. And the only continent I was missing was, unfortunately, Africa. And I always just say to my friends, if I ever lived in DC, this is what I would do. I'll be just doing meat pie and sausage roll. And at the time, Tokunbo's Kitchen was not even in my head.
Wow.
If you had told me then that I would actually be sitting here today talking about running a food business, I would have laughed because I'm like, no. And then came back to London, and again, it was the same thing. Whenever I go out, because I am fussy and because I do think Nigerian and West African food is so amazing, when I go out, I'm always looking for, where can I eat suya in London? That's my thing. And so in 2015, I discovered the recipe for meat pie online. And like I said, when I like something, I will literally learn to cook it to perfection. So that's what I did. I was always baking meat pies every day, and my friends started ordering from me because it was that good. And then in the summer, I went to a festival in Walthamstow, actually, in the Walthamstow Garden Party to see Femi Kuti perform. And I was waiting for jerk chicken, and I was and I'd already got my chicken. I was actually waiting for my friend's chicken. And they kept saying, 15 minutes. Next thing I knew, my friends went to see Femi, came back to meet me, still waiting for this jerk chicken. I thought, this is so ridiculous. In Nigeria, when you're waiting for street food, the most you wait is 10, 15 minutes. So that same evening, I went home and I Googled how to start a street food business. And I launched at South Bank at the Africa Utopia 5 weeks later. So.
Damn, this is story. You mentioned psychologist.
Yes.
Psychologist training. I love things of the mind. Power to the people, psychology. My wife is in there, she's there, she's a psychologist as well. And people normally teach me, how do you live with a psychologist because of the mind control thing? And she doesn't. But the reason why I mentioned that is, now, you are into food, you are a psychologist.
Yes.
Perfect person to talk about how food has any correlation with the mind. Is
Yes.
there any correlation?
Oh, definitely. I mean, people tend to use food as a way to deal with their emotions. So a lot of people will binge on junk food because it's like, oh, I'm stressed, so let me just grab a bite of chocolate or grab a bite of biscuit or have some crisp, and not actually understand. So for example, I have an unhealthy addiction for Haagen-Dazs, and I will literally binge for like a month and eat all the Haagen-Dazs that I want. But then when my jeans start to feel a bit too tight, or I realize that actually I've been eating way too much ice cream this month, I will stop eating Haagen-Dazs. But also for me, I realized that my Haagen-Dazs is my happy place. So I go for the ice cream when I'm having a good time, when I'm feeling good. And I actually realized that anytime I'm feeling depressed and I have Haagen-Dazs, I don't enjoy it. And I'm like, I did not just waste £5 on that type of ice cream because I'm depressed. So whereas other people, they will eat the ice cream because they're depressed, for me, it's the other way around. But a lot of people, I have, I have family who have struggled with weight issues in the past. And, even my sister, she had a lot of issues with weight in the past. And, again, for me, it's always like portion control. Because my mom, again, growing up as an African child, when you get a plate of food, you have to finish it. Because your mom will be like, if you don't eat this food, it's same. So I learned to only take, and because I'm fussy and I don't want to then be forced to finish a plate of food that I'm not enjoying, so I learned portion control from a young age, where I would only take a little bit to start off with, and then if I'm enjoying it, then I'll get more. And I think a lot of people, unfortunately, they get a big plate of food and then they feel that they have to finish it, but then they haven't learned. And also, your stomach adjusts to your diet. So if you eat a big plate of food, your stomach is expecting a big plate of food every time you eat. So portion control is something that I'm, always advocating about. And also, just like I cook, because I've always cooked and I've always learned, I kind of unconsciously learned how to cook in a healthy way. So for example, obviously I'm Yoruba, and people know that Yoruba people like their stew and they like a lot of oil, very peppery stew. And I remember when I moved out from living with my mom, because I'd always cooked for mom, I only liked oxtail out of all the meat. So oxtail was like my favorite cut of meat. So I was like, okay, now I can only cook, because my mom was like, you can't just cook one meat stew, you have to cook like assorted meat. And I'm like, why am I cooking assorted meat? I'm not going to eat all of it, I'm just going to eat that one piece of meat. So I remember learning to cook oxtail stew for myself and seeing that oxtail is such a fatty cut of meat. So when you cook the oxtail in the stew, it releases its own oil. You then add more oil into the pot, and then you're left with this mass of oily stew. So I was like, actually, if I just cut out the oil that I'm introducing and let the oxtail, the meat itself, give the stew oil. So yeah, and so even with chicken, a lot of meat has its own natural oil. So you actually, over the years, I've learned to eliminate putting more oil into the food unless it's necessary, or if I want to fry that particular stew.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's true, because growing up back in the days, damn, the oil have to be swimming on top of the stew. It's like, no oil, no stew. So, okay, so we should all reduce our oil intake. To be fair, yeah, my wife is not a good, she's not, okay.
Are you sure you're still going to have a wife at the end of this?
No, because the reason I'm saying that is, growing up, there has to be oil on top of the stew. That's how I grew up. But then, I realized that at home now, we buy this natural virgin oil thing. I don't know the name. It's that big, maybe in that size, and we might not even finish it for 3-4 months. Yeah. And I'll be thinking, there's no oil on this stew. Yes, sir.
Quick one.
Yes.
With this oil you're talking about, I was told that the oil is there to preserve the food.
There you go. You see?
Because if you take the oil all the way off, and you scoop and you don't heat it up, because obviously fridges wasn't all around, it was like those new stuff. So the oil was keeping it safe. And another thing was charcoal was preserving the food. Charcoal, you don't charcoal in your stew or soup. You don't go back.
Yeah. And that's the thing about culture. And even, I remember years ago, I came across this interesting story where a young bride was learning to cook a particular dish, and her mom said, you have to cook it in this pot of stew, in this size pot. And she was like, but this pot is small, why am I using this pot to cook? And her mom was like, that's how I was taught to cook. So she went to ask her grandmother, and the grandmother was like, yes, you have to cook in this pot, that's how I learned to cook. Went to ask the great grandmother. The great grandmother said, in my time, that was the biggest pot that we had now. So just because that's the way it's always been done doesn't mean that that's how it still applies. Yes, in the past when there wasn't fridge and oil was used to preserve the stew, but even then when it was time to eat, that oil would be decanted, it would be scooped away. But over the years we've lost that narrative about why we introduce so much oil into our cooking. We now cook this big pot of stew, we leave the oil, and we digest the oil that we're eating, which is actually not meant to be eaten. It's just meant to fry the stew, preserve it if you need to, and then decant the rest away and actually enjoy. Because the other thing as well is, I remember when I was living in DC, my roommate, when it was time to fry egg, I was always like, my eyes was in oil, the amount of oil that she would use to fry eggs. And I would challenge her, and she'd be like, no, it won't taste the same. And then years later, I moved out of DC. She sends me a message. She said, Tokunbo, you're right, I actually tried frying my eggs without that much oil. And for the first time, I was actually able to really enjoy the taste of the food that I'm eating. Even the jollof rice that you guys are eating, I'm very conscious that I don't put too much oil in my jollof rice. It's nothing that I hate. Then you get a plate of jollof rice and then you're eating and you can see it's just grease. I
was just about to ask that maybe you should talk us through the kind of things that people are eating right now.
Yes, so I remember, when I started Tokunbo's Kitchen, initially it was called T's Food Corner, and I actually just wanted to do street food. So the first event that I did, I was doing roasted plantain, suya, meat pie, and I remember my friend coming and she was like, where's the jollof rice? I'm like, no, I'm not doing jollof rice, I'm just doing street food. This is the vision that I had for my business. And then a couple of weeks later, I was doing another market in Brick Lane. And then I had everyone, even white people, coming up and they're like, where's the jollof rice? I was like, okay. So the next week I started cooking jollof rice. And then a lot of people kept coming up and they were like, is Nigerian, because the question I get asked a lot is, what is Nigerian food? And is Nigerian food vegan? Do you have vegan options? And then when I started thinking about it, and I was like, actually a lot of our food that we eat is actually vegan based. So the jollof rice that you're eating and the jollof rice that I cook for my events is always vegan so that everybody's able to enjoy it. I don't use any kind of meat stock. I don't use MSG in my cooking. And again, that was because I remember a mentor of mine had some health issues and she challenged me because every time she had food that had MSG, kind of like Maggi seasoning cube, she would break out in rashes. So she challenged me to try and cook my dishes without using Maggi. And so I did, and at first it was kind of like a strange, my taste bud was so used to this seasoning cube that it took me a while to adjust, but once I got rid of that taste, then I started to appreciate and enjoy the food more. So the jollof rice is a vegan dish, and then the spinach and kale is called eforiro, and the literal translation is vegetable stew. It's a very common dish in the Yoruba culture. And the other thing about Nigerian food is, even though Nigeria is such a big, massive country, and even though there are similarities in the food that we eat across region, the food is also very regional. So eforiro is very much a Yoruba dish. But then you have idikankon in a different region, which is similar processes. It's the only trinity of most Nigerian food is the tomato, onions, and peppers. If you have those three things at home, you can pretty much make any Nigerian ingredient. So the eforiro is, again, the base is the spinach kale cooked in the bell peppers and onions, and then some fried plantain, and I also did some suya chicken bites. Yeah.
Where is my food? Hey. I'll come to you. So, last question before we go on break. Do you still do events, say, maybe not necessarily for corporates, maybe for weddings and whatnot, and if you do, how can we get in touch?
Okay, so I do private events. So my first ever supper club was actually here at the engine room when they were still at the other place 2 years ago. Yeah, so I do birthday parties, I do private catering, and I also do private chefs. So if you just want to have a get together for your friends at home and you don't want to cook. I don't enjoy cooking for myself, but when I have to get up to cook for people, for some reason, I'm like, even if I haven't slept 4 hours, I will get up and do that. So, and the best way to get me is social media on my website, tokunboskitchen.com, and it's Tokunbo's Kitchen on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook.
All right. How is the food, guys? Good. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.